So for some conclusions, I've got a couple examples here too, but you want to be really careful about different hybrids and different planting dates when it comes to using the imagery within the same field. This example is from western Nebraska. It's irrigated maize, and it identifies a south field and a north field. If you look really carefully, you might be able to see an area in the north part of the field that's a little darker. If you convert that entire image to NDVI, you say, well, shoot, I don't see anything there. What's going on? Remember, this conversion used all the pixels in that image. The total area was used, and so the extremes in the colors are diffuse and not so distinct. Now I'm going to show you what happens if you only use the data from the cornfields, the north field and the south field. You can see that there's much more resolution when you're only using the cornfield. You're not worried about the roads, the pastures, whatever else might be growing out here. You see that they're very similar. You can see even more than you can with that color infrared. And again, it comes down to the fact that we're only dealing with 3 colors here. Green is good, yellow is average, red is poor. And yet, what we've got is 60 centimeter resolution.
Mm-hmm.
A couple more conclusions, and then we'll be done.
Jim,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I forgot to mention, if anyone has a question, they can just go ahead in the chat window and enter the question. I had a question myself, if I may, regarding the previous image. How are the differences coming up so clearly in the third picture? Is it because you're doing some type of standardization within the field, or how is it being processed to show it?
Yeah, yes, Ed, the difference is that in the center picture, all of the data, including the roads, the field, all the information is going into the calculation, and the color extremes, Ed, are the same in both pictures. Meaning we're using an upper extreme for red and green. Those are the two ends of the spectra. But if we eliminate all these other areas here, if we eliminate all those when we do our calculation and only talk about the cornfield, now we still got the same extremes in our colors, but we're only talking about the cornfields. See, in the center picture here, we have a lot of dark green here on the left or right edge. So that's going into the calculation. That's going into the extremes. Whereas in the cornfield, we do not have that. We've drawn a boundary around that. So here we have, this is furrow irrigated. And so we have an area at the beginning of the field here where the crop is more vigorous. And you can sort of see that different hybrid or something was different up in this upper part of the field here. And again, it's because we've got high resolution imagery, we don't need as many pixels, as many colors.
I see. Thank you.
Okay.
We have another question, Francis.
Okay.
If you wish, I can unmute you, or I can read the question. I'll try unmuting so you can. Francis from South Africa would like to ask a question about. Francis, do you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I just opened the microphone.
Are you using? Can you hear?
I can
Are
hear.
you using the?
Go ahead.
I can't hear.
The NDVI. Oh, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Let's try again. I can read it myself, but go ahead, and if not, I will read it. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to know, with GeoAgro, do you use the measurements?
Sorry, maybe the sound is not coming out clearly. So
NDVI.
I'm sorry that I will read. I will read it. I will read it myself, Francis, because its sound quality is not coming out good. Sorry for that. Let me just reread it. So Francis is asking if do you eliminate the field only, or are you using the whole image?
So we're only using the field. In the right picture, we're only using the field. In the center picture, we're using the whole image.
I see. I hope that answers your question, Francis. And okay,
what we've done is so what we've done, Ed, is to normalize it to our specific field and not for the entire area.
I see. So then the normalization process has a lot to do with showing up the differences. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And one more question.
The boundary around the field needs to be well defined.
I see. And how do you normalize it? Because you mentioned some criteria, taking the maximum yield as a reference value, the medium yield as a reference value, or maybe the nitrogen rates. In this case, what criteria did you use?
See, in this particular case, what they're doing is basically it is not normalized yet. And what they do is they draw the boundary around the field to identify the data set that will now go into the NDVI calculation. And if we wanted to talk to another farmer, we would need to go in and essentially generate what we would call the sufficiency index. And that's the next step, but it's not necessary in many cases, because the NDVI value and the things that we're interested in this field are the patterns that show up in right image. We really don't care in this case about talking to the neighbor. But if we wanted to make this into a proxy yield map now, this is where we would now need to normalize it and identify a minimum yield, a maximum yield, and we would probably use the mean yield after the fact, meaning that if the farmer did not have a yield monitor, we would like to redistribute that grain, and we would use that average yield or total amount of grain coming from his field to redistribute that grain. So normalizing doesn't always have to be used, but it's part of the concept and the relationship of what we're doing. Remember, earlier we said that the vigor and relative yield are highly related. Vigor is nothing more than relative, I guess, vigor is a relative value. It's either healthy, 100%, or some degree of less healthiness.
Great. I have a comment from Tony Tony, if you wish, I can try to mute you, see if the sound quality is good. If not, I will reread it. So I'm muting you if you would like to share that. Go ahead, Tony, if you would like to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you a little bit. Yes, we can hear you a little bit. Okay.
My main question is on the center one. You got all the red in the housing area. That there is now affecting the greenness of your land.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
That's correct.
So that's why you're wanting us to do polygons around each specific land and take away whatever we don't want. Okay.
You're
I'm
just right.
understanding it.
Very, very sharp.
Thank you. No, I understand that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you, Tony. I don't know if there are any other questions. Silas, I'm going to unmute you, Silas, so you can ask directly. If not, I will read it.
Okay. We got a question for you. When normalizing all the same hybrids, should you separate out certain hybrids so they don't have that variation nearly as much?
Yes. When you've got multiple hybrids in the field, that's very similar to having different planting dates in some cases. So you're going to have different degrees of greenness, and you should draw your polygon around each hybrid and normalize each hybrid separately, or calculate the NDVI and the color that's associated for each hybrid. It's basically the same effect as the center versus the right differences that you see on this image. So if you have multiple hybrids in the field, we would say it's a pain in the butt.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Silas.
Thank you. Thank you, Silas.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I mute and unmute because sometimes there's echo so I've just open when. Okay, so if there are no other questions, maybe I don't know if there are no other questions at the moment. Jim, I'll
Okay, I'll go ahead.
I'll let you know if there are other questions.
Okay. The other caution I would leave with you is that if there are planting date differences, and this gets back to growth stages, be very careful. This example happens where the commercial applicator didn't clean out his sprayer very well, and he started going through the field and killed a bunch of corn. It happened to rain, so he had to quit. When he came back 2 days later, the corn was dying, and so they had to replant. And in this case, the spatial resolution of the imagery was about 30 centimeters, very high quality stuff, but you can see a difference there between the bulk of the field and the part that was replanted. So this is just a caution, that it goes back to the question about what do we do with different hybrids. In analyzing this, the individual would typically then draw a polygon on the line that differentiate between the two hybrids or the two planting dates. So just a couple more cautions and thoughts, that we think that we've used this procedure some on wheat. We think it should work on soybeans and sorghum just as well. But we're not sure about the best timing for some of these other crops, when it's most important. If you're going to have lodging or disease problems in the field, imagery is not likely to pick all that up very well. And so it's a caution for you. And finally, I will just tell you that these large combines are going to be tending to mask out and diffuse a whole lot of the spatial resolution that is typically going to be seen if you use imagery to generate a proxy for the yield map. And finally, if you've got yield maps or you want to gain access to imagery, at least if you're in the U.S., you can get some of this imagery free from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. The upper indications are that you can get software from either Nebraska or Kansas, or Missouri, I'm sorry, free for cleaning up yield maps. And if you're interested in management zone delineation for making management decisions, University of Missouri has got some good software. So with that, folks, I hope that I've offered you something of value, if nothing more, stimulated your mind a bit, and hope that you'll find some value in taking some pictures and trying to dig into them, figure out what you can learn. Thanks again.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. We really appreciate your help and your experience. I had a couple of comments that tie into your last conclusions. If there are any other questions, just let us know through the chat window, and we'll open the microphone. In the meantime, just to bring up some topics that are related. This coming Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time, which is 5 p.m. Germany and South Africa time, and 1 p.m. Argentina, we'll have Dr. David Franzen, who will be presenting creating management zones based on different data sources. One of them is remote sensing. So that will be interesting, and I think that's related also with the management zone analyst that Jim is mentioning. The other comment is that about timing and different crops. The following Friday, we'll have a presentation on productivity maps, which is a method that GeoAgro is using. Will be presented by the agronomist Victoria Corte, who she's one of GeoAgro's staff, and she'll be presenting. She's an agronomist specialized in remote sensing, so we'll be discussing a little bit about the timing in different crops, because productivity maps are a way to show the high and low yields within the field, and it's related with the different with the crop history that the field has, and it can be applicable to different crops. So timing is key, and we'll be discussing a little bit more when is the right time to take imagery for different crops.